The night my brother threw me and my 6-year-old daughter out of our childhood home, it was raining so hard the street looked like the city had given up and turned into a river. I stood on the front lawn holding 2 garbage bags full of clothes while my daughter sat calmly on one of them eating dry cereal from a plastic cup like this was completely normal behavior. Honestly, I admired her. 3 days earlier, we had buried our parents. 3 days. Most people spend that time grieving. My older brother apparently spent it listening to billionaire podcasts and developing a personality disorder. "You don't understand real estate," he said while tightening the belt on a silk robe he'd probably bought online for $19. "Luxury tenants don't want children around." "It's midnight," I said. "Normal humans are asleep." "I'm not normal anymore," he replied dramatically. "I'm an entrepreneur." The idiot had started speaking in a fake accent after inheriting temporary control of the apartment building. Sometimes British. Sometimes whatever he thought rich people sounded like. Tonight he sounded like a malfunctioning movie villain. Lightning flashed behind him, while he pointed at me like he was announcing a prison sentence. "You are financially inefficient." My daughter slowly looked up from her cereal. "Mom," she whispered loudly, "why does Uncle Darren dress like Discount Batman?" I nearly choked trying not to laugh. My brother's eye twitched so hard I thought he might actually explode right there on the porch. "Out!" he screamed. Then he threw my suitcase into the rain dramatically, and immediately slipped on the wet steps. I shouldn't have laughed. But I did. Hard. Even my daughter clapped. He stood up soaking wet, silk robe hanging open, dignity completely evaporated. "You think this is funny?" "A little," I admitted. The truth was, underneath the sarcasm and jokes, I was terrified. I had $43 in my bank account, a 6-year-old depending on me, and nowhere to go. Grief already felt like someone had parked a truck on my chest, and now my own brother was treating us like unwanted furniture. But humans are stubborn creatures. We cry in bathrooms for 10 minutes, and then go make dinner. We survive things out of pure spite sometimes. So I grabbed the bags, took my daughter's hand, and walked away while my brother yelled something about high-value tenants behind us. 20 minutes later we ended up inside a tiny all-night diner near the highway. The neon sign flickered like it was fighting for its life. Half the booths were cracked, and somebody in the corner was arguing with a jukebox. My daughter looked around happily. "Fancy," she said. That's when I noticed the waitress. She was tall, silver-eyed, and definitely not human. Forearms moved effortlessly as she balanced plates across the diner. Her metallic blue skin shimmered every time the lights flickered overhead. An alien. Which honestly wasn't even the weirdest part of my week. She approached our booth carefully. "You both appear emotionally devastated. Would pancakes assist?" I stared at her for a second. Then I burst into exhausted tears. Not graceful movie tears either. Ugly crying. Full emotional collapse. The alien waitress blinked twice, then silently placed extra fries on the table beside me. "Humans," she said thoughtfully. "Fascinating species. You smile while falling apart." My daughter pointed at her. "Mom," she whispered with complete seriousness, "I think the alien lady likes you." For the first time since my parents died, I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. The alien waitress introduced herself the next morning after bringing my daughter a mountain of pancakes covered in enough whipped cream to violate several human laws. Her name was Lyra. At least, that was the simplified Earth version because apparently her real name sounded like a microwave fighting a violin. She sat across from me during her break while my daughter colored on napkins beside us. "I have been studying humans for 7 months," she explained seriously. "Why?" She sipped coffee carefully. "Your species survives impossible stress using sarcasm and frozen desserts. We find this medically concerning." Honestly, fair. Over the next few weeks, the diner became our safe place. Lyra worked nights, and somehow every shift ended with us talking for hours while my daughter slept in the booth beside us wearing a French fry like a tiny bracelet. I learned Lyra wasn't just a waitress. She was actually some kind of interstellar business owner stranded on Earth after a shipping dispute involving space customs violations and something illegal about emotional support reptiles. I decided not to ask questions. Meanwhile, she became obsessed with human behavior, especially flirting. One night I jokingly told her a guy at the diner had invited a waitress over for Netflix and chill. Lyra looked horrified. You regulate body temperature while watching documentaries? No, I laughed. It means, actually, never mind. Unfortunately, she researched it herself online. The next evening she arrived wearing what she thought was seductive human clothing, black sunglasses indoors and leather pants so tight she walked like an injured robot. My daughter nearly fell out of the booth laughing. You look like a divorced superhero, she told Lyra. Instead of getting offended, Lyra looked proud. Excellent. Somehow, despite the chaos, life slowly improved. Lyra offered us a temporary apartment above one of her older properties across town. The building was a disaster. Half the tenants were behind on rent, somebody kept stealing hallway light bulbs, and 2 grown men had started an underground raccoon betting league in the basement. Still, it was home. And apparently I was weirdly good at property management. Mostly because I had the exhausted energy of a single mother with unresolved trauma. Nothing scares people more than a tired woman holding a flip-flop. One tenant tried yelling at me about plumbing problems until I stared at him silently for 10 straight seconds. He apologized and fixed the sink himself. Another night I broke up a drunken karaoke fight between 3 alien mechanics arguing over who sang love songs better. One of them cried. One proposed marriage to a vending machine. Human resources was not prepared for this building. Through all of it, Lyra stayed beside me. Some nights we'd sit on the rooftop after work while the city lights flickered below us. My daughter would fall asleep against my shoulder while Lyra quietly asked questions about humans. Why do you continue helping people who hurt you? She asked once. I thought about my brother. About the rain. About losing my parents. Then I shrugged. Because if we stop caring, I said softly, people like my brother win. Lyra stared at me for a long moment with those glowing silver eyes. Then one of her 4 hands gently squeezed mine. Unfortunately, the romantic moment was immediately ruined when my daughter popped awake and yelled. Finally! I was starting to think both of you were blind. A week later, while reviewing old financial records for the building, Lyra discovered something interesting. My brother wasn't rich. Not even close. He was drowning in gambling debt. Apparently my brother had decided the best way to process grief was by becoming the world's most annoying fake millionaire. The man posted motivational quotes online every morning like he was legally required to embarrass the bloodline. Winners create opportunities, he wrote one day beside a rented sports car. The comments roasted him alive because somebody noticed the dealership logo still reflected in the window. Meanwhile, his poker nights became legendary disasters. Every Friday he invited shady businessmen, wannabe influencers, and at least one guy who definitely sold illegal vitamins out of a gym bag. They drank expensive liquor, smoked cigars they didn't know how to hold properly, and threw money around while pretending to understand cryptocurrency. According to one tenant, my brother once lost $8,000 while explaining alpha male energy. I almost respected the commitment to stupidity. One evening Lyra walked into my office carrying a stack of financial documents and the expression of someone discovering a raccoon operating heavy machinery. I have concerning news, she announced. That sentence has never ended positively. She sat beside me and spread the papers across the desk. Turns out my brother had borrowed against the apartment building repeatedly to fund his fake luxury lifestyle. Gambling debts. Bad investments. Some kind of energy drink business called Crypto Beast Thunder Juice. I stared at the paperwork. He used our parents' building for this? Lyra nodded slowly. Fortunately, she added casually, I purchased the debt contracts last month. I blinked. You what? I own controlling interest now. She smiled while sipping coffee. Humans call this karma, yes? I just stared at her. This gorgeous alien woman had quietly destroyed my brother financially while I was busy unclogging toilets and yelling at raccoon gamblers. Honestly? That was incredibly attractive. "You're terrifying," I whispered. "Thank you." Then I kissed her. Right there in the office, surrounded by unpaid utility bills and a sticky note that said, "Basement smells haunted again." For a second the entire universe disappeared. Then my daughter walked in carrying juice boxes. "Finally!" she yelled. "Do you know how long I've been waiting for this? I already drew wedding ideas." Nothing humbles a romantic moment faster than a 6-year-old holding crayon sketches of your future. A week later my brother announced what he called his victory celebration. Apparently he'd convinced everyone online he was becoming a real estate mogul. The party was held in the apartment building lobby. He hired violin players. Actual violin players. There was a chocolate fountain, gold decorations, and an enormous painted portrait of himself hanging near the elevators like he was a dictator with a skincare routine. When we arrived, conversation stopped instantly. I wore a simple black dress. Lyra stood beside me in a silver suit that made half the room forget basic language. My daughter marched in confidently eating mini shrimp from somebody else's catering tray. My brother spotted me and laughed loudly. "Well, look who came back," he announced dramatically. "Need money?" "No," I replied calmly. "Just property management updates." He smirked. "You don't belong here anymore." That's when Lyra handed the legal documents to his lawyer. I watched the color leave my brother's face in real time. First confusion. Then panic. Then the horrifying realization that he no longer owned the building. Technically, he now owed rent to me. The room went silent. One violinist slowly stopped playing mid-song. My brother opened his mouth, made a strange choking noise, then collapsed backward directly into the chocolate fountain table. The entire thing tipped over. Shrimp flew everywhere. And somewhere in the chaos, my daughter whispered proudly, "Mom, humans are amazing." My brother regained consciousness 30 minutes later, covered in melted chocolate, cocktail sauce, and what looked like emotional bankruptcy. Honestly, it matched his personality perfectly. The tenants watched him stumble around the lobby while the violin players quietly packed their instruments and escaped like survivors fleeing a historical disaster. Nobody respected him anymore. Turns out fake confidence disappears quickly when people realize you gambled away an entire apartment building while wearing velvet loafers. By the following week, ownership officially transferred to Lyra and me. And unlike my brother, I actually cared about the people living there. The first thing I did was repair the elevators that had been making death noises for 6 months. Then we cleaned the hallways, fixed the broken heaters, and converted an abandoned storage room into a daycare space for parents working late shifts. One elderly tenant cried when I replaced her leaking ceiling. Another hugged me because nobody had listened to maintenance requests in years. That was the thing my brother never understood. People remember kindness longer than money. Meanwhile, Lyra adapted to human life in increasingly ridiculous ways. She became obsessed with reality television and started describing arguments as low-budget combat rituals. She also accidentally learned the wrong meaning of several human phrases from internet forums. One morning she proudly announced to the tenants that we were raw-dogging adulthood together. I nearly died. An old man dropped his groceries. My daughter screamed, laughing into a couch cushion, while Lyra stood there confused, holding coffee mugs in all 4 hands. "Was that incorrect?" she asked. "Yes," I wheezed. "Deeply incorrect." Romantically, things somehow became even more chaotic. Apparently in Lyra's culture, holding hands in public was considered a formal marriage proposal. I discovered this after casually grabbing her hand inside the elevator one evening. She froze completely. "All witnesses acknowledge the union," she whispered dramatically. "What?" The elevator door opened to reveal 3 tenants clapping enthusiastically. My daughter appeared from nowhere wearing a toy tiara. "I knew it!" she screamed. "I already made seating charts." By the end of the month, she'd planned an entire wedding using crayons, stickers, and what I'm pretty sure was blackmail. As for my brother? Karma worked overtime. Since he still owed enormous debt connected to the property damage and unpaid loans, Lyra offered him a deal instead of jail involvement. He could work maintenance, which was how the former self-proclaimed luxury real estate king ended up unclogging toilets in a bright orange jumpsuit, while tenants called him Lord Bankruptcy. One kid asked if he was part of a prison exchange program. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. A few weeks later, I visited my parents' memorial with my daughter and Lyra beside me. The wind moved softly through the cemetery trees while the city glowed quietly in the distance. For the first time in months, the grief didn't feel crushing. It just felt human. We lost the house for a while, I whispered softly. But I think we found something better. My daughter squeezed my hand. Lyra wrapped two of hers around my arm. And honestly, after everything we survived, standing there with the weird little family life had thrown together, I finally understood something important. Humans are terrifying creatures. You can break our hearts. You can betray us. You can throw us into the rain with $43 and no plan. But if you give us a reason to fight, we'll rebuild our entire lives out of sarcasm, rage, caffeine, and pure stubbornness. And sometimes, we'll accidentally marry an alien along the way.